We kept being asked about this main competitor product that made some really bold claims around inflammation. And one night at the hotel, we're having dinner, he pulls up his computer and starts clicking around and really looking into their research. And he was like, Sarah, the only study showing that it helps fight inflammation was on 7 obese cats. And we laid our heads down on the table. Just imagine Garfield or something, right? And just because it works for Garfield does not mean it's going to work for my body.
Welcome to the Natural Products Marketer Podcast. I'm Tina.
And I'm Amanda. And we're here to make marketing easier for natural products businesses so you can reach more people and change more lives. Hey guys, welcome back to Natural Products Marketer. We are so glad to be joined today by Sarah Burden. I have known Sarah for quite some time now. I actually have a vivid memory of meeting Sarah. It was at Expo West, 6+ years ago. Mm-hmm. And I remember walking up to the booth that she was working at, and my colleagues were already there. And they were just nerding out at everything that Sarah had to say. And I was like, who is this lady? So then I joined the party and I realized, I was like, this woman is a genius and she's hilarious. And I was like, why can't more people be like Sarah? So Sarah, thank you so much for being here today.
What a great intro. I love it so much. Thank you. I do feel like I deliver edutainment, right? We've got the facts, but also the razzle dazzle. So Thank you for picking up on that.
It was instantaneous. So,
and as fellow nerds, we appreciate the nerd part. Yes. And we are also fans of The Office and Parks and Recreation. So we are here for the fun.
Excellent. We got to have that balance in life, right?
100%. Yep.
Yeah. So Sarah, tell us a little bit about who you are and where you're at now and how you got into this industry in the first place.
Well, wonderful. Thanks again so much for inviting me to your podcast. I'm thrilled to be here with you both. So I've been working in supplements since 2002, which feels bonkers to say that so much of my life has been in this industry. But I had been working in cosmetics and skincare, working at department stores, and a couple people I worked with had started to question some of the ingredients in the formulas we sold. At 21, 22, never crossed my mind. But one day I was selling a really expensive cream to a customer and she leaned across the counter and she said, you know that it's more about what you put into your body than what you put on your body, right? And that was a pivotal moment for me because it had not occurred to me before that. I was a typical, young 20-something eating garbage food, right? And staying up late, never hydrating, no bottles of water ever. And it was showing up in my skin. So she said, there's a health food store down the street. You should go check it out. So I wandered into my first health food store, mind blown, the grind your own peanut butter machine and bottles of herbs I'd never heard of. And it just became my new passion. So I got the big famous Balch book of, natural remedies. And I just started reading it all the time, learning as much as I could. And I eventually got hired there in that department and started to be able to interact with customers where I learned so much from the customers, from my coworkers, from the different reps who came around. And I went to every training that anyone would let me attend. I would go off the clock if I needed to, just to try to soak up as much as I could. So I've been in the natural product industry since then.
Yeah. Awesome. It's funny. You're kind of like we talk a lot about how sometimes your best hires are your customers.
Yes.
And so you're definitely testament to that.
I was that person for sure. I wandered in like a, babe in the woods, like, what is all this stuff? And, never heard the pronunciation of most of these herbs, but I wanted to know.
Well, Sarah, I'm so excited for you to tell us more about your company because I was doing a little background look into what's going on. And it's something I have a passion for, which is the testing of these products. So tell us everything. How did it start? What made you get into that business and get that started? And what do you do?
Yeah, no, great question. So I think there's a number of different tracks you can take when you stay in the industry for a long time and you learn more. Maybe you want to get more into the storytelling art within the industry, maybe you want to get into the formulation part. And so I was kind of dabbling, looking at all of these different areas. And I came back to the same place you did, Tina, that if we can't prove that the products are effective, here's part of it. We just had our block party. I've got a great block. We have a wonderful community. And when I say I work in the natural products industry, I can feel that thing that happens where people either are afraid I'm going to try to enlist them in a multi-level marketing scheme, or they think everything we do is snake oil. And so I want to be part of the movement that helps establish credibility, that helps prove what we do. I can remember one time talking to somebody I was friends with who was a doctor at Northwestern, and she shared that her mom was having blood sugar issues. And I said, there's some really good evidence for cinnamon, something as simple as cinnamon. This was before Gymnema was kind of the go-to. And she said, I would really need to see some research before I'd ever be willing to recommend that to my mom. And at the time I thought, gosh, it's got 2,000 years of traditional use in India and Ayurvedic medicine, but she needed research. And so that's one of those other kind of pivotal moments of shaping your worldview, right? Someone in the medical community is going to need to see a published human clinical trial, randomized, controlled, gold standard clinical trial. So that's what radical science provides. So most clinical trials are run through organizations that can either accommodate pharmaceuticals, or they'll take on dietary supplement clinical trials as well. But the format was really built for the pharma model, that you can take a small sample size, 12 to 48 people is sort of the average for a pharmaceutical trial. And because of the drug-like effect of a pharmaceutical, you can kind of capture that change in some health metric quickly in a small population. Dietary supplements don't work like drugs. That's the definition. That's why we can sell them over the counter. And so it does take a larger population to really get a good idea. And because we are all so different in the way that we respond, they don't have a drug-like effect. They have a food-like effect, a botanical effect. And so Radical created a platform where dietary supplement brands or ingredient suppliers can get human clinical evidence here in the US from a diverse group of people to really find the true effects of the supplement, and during the R&D process to really finesse a formula so that it works for the demographic that you're looking to target.
Wow.
That's so fascinating.
Yeah.
I love that.
I know. And, I think there's so much research that can be done in this industry that has yet to be done. And some of the trials that are out there, I have a lot of questions around what form of this are they using? Is it pure? Because you get varying feedback from some of these trials where you're like, I feel like there's more evidence that should come our way that this thing will work. And at the same time, what are they using? So how do we know that this is the right thing and the right formulation? And so it's nice to hear that there's someone with your background that's getting into this work to help test, because we do know that there are different kinds of products on the market, some that have very effective formulations and some that don't even contain what they say are on the bottles.
Right. No, it's absolutely true. And yeah, it was only in 2022 that the FTC issued some clarification around their guidance that if you as a supplement company are making a bold claim on your product, there needs to be human clinical research to back that up. And it needs to be on a like population. I'll never forget, this was probably close to 10 years ago, but a good colleague of mine and I, who had done a lot of trainings across the country, we kept being asked about this main competitor product that made some really bold claims around inflammation. And one night at the hotel, we're having dinner, he pulls up his computer and starts clicking around and really looking into the research. And he was like, Sarah, the only study showing that it helps fight inflammation was on 7 obese cats. And we laid our heads down on the table. Yeah, just imagine Garfield or something, right? Just because it works for Garfield does not mean it's going to work for my body. So you're so right, Tina, that the standard of what counts as evidence, it's been a little shoddy sometimes within the industry. So the FTC has sort of tightened that guidance, hey, It needs to be people. If you're selling to an American audience, it needs to be Americans because, if a study is done in India, primarily vegetarian diet, tons of D3, lots of body movement, is that going to have the same effect on the Americans eating a standard American diet? It may not. Maybe it does, but we need to be able to prove that it does.
So if a manufacturer were to go through the clinical trial phase with Radical Science, what does that look like for them? And then what do they kind of get as far as being able to, like, come to find out their product's fantastic?
Yeah.
All of these great things. How can they then use that in their marketing material to tell that story?
That's a great question. So we feel like all data that we can get for you is good data. And we've had some brilliant brand partners who have even shared from the stage at Supply Side West when they had a product that did not beat placebo in terms of achieving statistical significance. And they went back and reformulated. And I love that kind of transparency, right? And I know that there are major retailers who also love that kind of transparency, that the brand invested in science, saw what the outcome was, and then made changes to bring the most effective product to the marketplace. That's going to ensure, customer satisfaction, loyalty, trust to not only that brand, but then all of the retailers who feature that brand and our industry as a whole. Then I won't have my neighbors at the barbecue saying, that stuff's a bunch of hogwash. So we love being able to provide the data and insights. Even in a pharmaceutical trial, only about 20% of drugs that would go through a trial end up achieving statistical significance against placebo. So it is an uphill battle to achieve that. So all data, we say, is good data because then you'll know more. You'll be able to see how your stuff is really affecting your customers. But sometimes we find things like, hey, maybe overall, maybe it didn't achieve statistical significance, but for women over 40, this thing was a home run. Well, now maybe that company can reposition this formula as a women over 40 sleep aid or whatever, right? So now you have a demographic who does respond to it, right? So there are a number of things you can do. If the product ends up being super successful, then the study can help substantiate the claims that you want to make, helps customers get a good night's sleep. We've had brands who share the statistics on their website. 87% of participants in a human randomized controlled trial saw better sleep quality within 6 weeks, so there are a number of different claims you can make with the outcome of your trial, but you can tinker, you can improve, you can shift your demographics, you can get more ROI on your marketing because you're going to be just talking to the people who have the highest likelihood of really feeling the effect of the formula. And if manufacturers, brands come to us during that R&D phase, we can really help optimize their cost of goods. We've had a brand partner who came pre-market to us and tested their formulation at 25 milligrams, 50 milligrams, 75 milligrams. They were all effective, but with the same degree of efficacy. Well, you can just manufacture the 25 milligram because everyone felt the same. So there are a lot of options of how brands and ingredient manufacturers can utilize the data, which turn into more credibility for retailers, more satisfaction for the end consumer.
So here's a thing that I'm really interested in because you're talking about helps with sleep over age 40 or 45 for women. What DSHEA is always on everyone's minds. So what are the things that you can do with clinical trials and the data that you get? And what are some things that maybe you cannot do still?
That's a great question. And this year in October will be the 30th anniversary of the DSHEA Act passing. I just got to be in Salt Lake City for the DSHEA Summit celebrating 30 years and get to hear from folks who were in the room, when that was enacted and the hard work that went into place in order to keep the industry safe. And Lauren Israelson from UNPA was one of the fiercest champions and one of the leaders in that effort. And he really emphasized, we have to keep protecting DSHEA. Because even though we might think it needs to evolve, maybe it's not perfect, nothing is, the likelihood that we'd get something passed like that again today is so low. We have to be champions of this, this regulation that we've got. So no matter what your study proves, and this is a great question, you could never say that a dietary supplement fixes, cures, manages, or treats any health condition. And so this is one of the reasons I wanted to come work at Radical. two of the brands I'd worked for in the past invested in clinical research. So like stage one is, I want more brands to invest in clinical research, but asterisk, clinical research that's being guided by people who understand DSHEA, understand the regulatory landscape of the dietary supplement industry. Because especially one brand I worked for did not understand regulations, did not understand DSHEA, spent a huge amount of money on a study to prove that the product could have an effect on cholesterol, not realizing they were not going to be able to say this lowers cholesterol, even if they proved it. So that was unfortunately not a great spend. So I think if a brand is thinking about clinical research, partner with a platform, with an organization who is focused on the dietary supplement space so that you don't accidentally blow 5 years worth of research funds on something that you can never share externally, right? It was such a heartbreaker to see. So when I saw Radical's model, it was almost like if you take a kid bumper bowling, like we're not going to accidentally wind up with a non-compliant claim here.
Yes, that
sounds
is
like
huge.
Yeah, such a needed service.
Yeah.
Don't you think? Yeah.
Very, very cool. So I'm curious, just because I like to know these types of things. What are some of like the things behind the scenes that happen in a clinical trial that maybe people don't know about?
Oh, it's a good question. So one thing that is trickier than anyone ever expects is getting your placebo manufactured. So especially so many brands work with co-manufacturers. They have their schedule planned so far in advance, and then you need to run 500 bottles of a placebo. That can be tricky. So starting the process earlier than you think is a really good idea if you think you're going to want to pursue clinical research, because you have to get scheduled into the line. It's not a moneymaker for the co-manufacturer. So you're going to get relegated to like the very last possible moment. So kind of building that into the schedule, and just the kind of, cleverness and creativity that needs to go into sometimes building a placebo. What if I have a client who makes a greens powder? What's the placebo going to be? It can't be anything botanical because it has to have no effect, right? So there's no herb or green that I can give them that's going to have zero effect. So we're going to have to get kind of crafty with that. If it's a tincture, same kind of thing, right? It has to match and be, undetectably different from the active. So I think that's one of the kind of interesting light bulb moments that most people have when they start thinking about a true gold standard clinical trial versus an open label consumer impression study. So a consumer impression study can be great for market research, but it can't substantiate a claim because there's no control against something that looks identical so that we can account statistically for that placebo effect, which in our industry is really strong.
Yeah. Well, this is amazing. And it makes me think of, I've been reading this book, How Not to Age by Dr. Greger.
Yeah.
At the very beginning, he talks about how many of the supplements don't have what they say are in the supplement. Mm-hmm. So tell us a little bit more about how can just a consumer know that they're getting what they think they're getting? What should they be looking for? And what kind of certifications should they see? Or what are the labeling practices that have to be done that do protect the consumer?
Yeah. Well, I heard a piece of advice a couple years back, during the height of the pandemic when we were all trying to figure out what we could possibly take for our immune system and trying to do things remotely. And someone told me, don't put anything on your body or into your body that you bought from Amazon, which I thought was pretty startling advice to hear. But then as more and more trickles out, and we've got industry leaders like Now Foods who will do a big sweep and order a bunch of things online from Amazon and then test it. And it doesn't turn out to be authentic. It doesn't have the recommended label amount or the declared label amount. So I think that's one thing that unfortunately there is a lot of counterfeiting that happens, and it's in the most popular categories, right? So if you're Googling or searching turmeric, creatine, the most popular supplement ingredients are the ones that are getting counterfeited. So working with a brand or a retailer who you trust and who has established credibility, I think is a great place to start. I look for, personally as a shopper, I look for CGMP status of the manufacturer to make sure that they're following those those standard good manufacturing processes. NSF certification is certainly a great third party that I like to see on the supplements I consume and that I give to my family too. So I think some of those third party certifications are really smart to have. And I think also just as consumers, we always want to keep our little spidey sense going that if this deal seems too good to be true, right? If this supplement is a fraction of the cost of all the rest of the pack, when it comes to pricing on this supplement, I have to ask myself why.
Yeah, 100%. And it just makes me think the reason that you're calling these things out, and it's great for them to be on the label. And I know that it costs some of the manufacturers more money to make sure that they're certified or that they've got some other transparency happening, and that they're acting in good faith and that they are actually producing the product that they're saying they are producing. And doing things like that protects the consumer and protects them as a manufacturer. So I love seeing these practices put into place. And we know that there are bad actors that are out there. And unfortunately, it feels like a tax, that we have to do all of these things and do disclosures and have certifications. And at the same time, it's nice to hear. And I think that we should be the ones that are trumpeting this on behalf of these manufacturers and telling people this is who you can trust, because there are people that are out there, you're right, making counterfeit substances on Amazon. And we are not in favor of consumers wasting money on something that's not going to have efficacy. That's why we want to be the champions of the manufacturers who are getting this right. And there are some lovely manufacturers who are very transparent, honest, do the research, have things tested, and they make sure that what they claim on their label is what's in that product.
Absolutely. Part of the Deshay summit I was just at involved the current leader of the Office of Dietary Supplements from the FDA speaking on the panel. I always think she's brave for showing up, because there's going to be grumbles in the audience full of folks working in the dietary supplement industry, right? About some of the decisions or the way that things get run. So I always respect her for showing up at these events. But it's clear just from patterns over the years, that office is really underfunded. They don't have the amount of resources or staff to be investigating as many manufacturers as there are now. The size of that office hasn't kept up with the growth of our industry. And so there are trade associations within the natural products industry, CRN comes to mind, that really do advocate for that sort of self-policing. Like how can we put some best practices into place, that a standard we can all rise to, and then the FDA can say, oh, check, look, they're doing all of these things that we would like to see.
Yeah. So Sarah, if anyone wanted to learn more about radical science, how to go through, a clinical trial for themselves and their brand, how could they do that, and ways that they could get in touch?
Yeah. Anyone can reach out to us through the Radical Science website, and we're radical spelled CLE instead of CAL. The radical is the first root of a plant that grows underground. So we feel like we're breaking new ground with our model. We're kind of doing things in a radical way, but with that organic growth happening in a new territory. So they can reach out to us to find out more. Clinical trials are what we do, but because of our unique model, our completely virtual model, we actually are able to gather quite a bit of market research for brands as well. So in addition to the data that will help substantiate claims, we gather a lot of data that people go elsewhere for consumer research. And so that's all built into our trial model. So folks in marketing teams, salespeople, R&D folks, all really benefit from the kinds of data that we're able to generate around an ingredient, a formulation in your innovation pipeline, or an established legacy product.
Tell me a little bit more about these market research pieces. How do you get started with that? What are you learning? Who are you asking? Like, how does that work?
Yeah. So the participants who agree to be a part of a radical trial, we have 500 participants per study every time. So 250 will receive the active product, 250 receive the placebo. We also can offer multi-arm studies. So we have sometimes 1,000 folks in a study. I think we've got one in the queue that's going to have 2,000 people in the study. So that's a ton of data that we'll be able to generate through 6 weeks of interacting with all those participants. Some of the questions that they're getting specifically deal with whatever kind of study that they're in. If it's a sleep product, right? They're getting questions all throughout about how many hours did you sleep last night? Over the last week, would you say the quality of your sleep improved, declined, right? So they're reporting back on their feelings, their fatigue, their energy levels, their cognition. And so we're collecting all that data to help with the outcome of the study. But in addition, if a brand say delivers their supplement by a sachet, like a stick pack sachet, and maybe this is in the innovation pipeline, this is still in the R&D phase. Well, we're collecting all that data about the health outcomes, but we could also be asking questions like, how easily did this dissolve in your liquid? What did you use, hot or cold water? Did you like the flavor? Would you have liked it an easier tear stick pack, right? So we can be collecting all kinds of that real-time data as well. And that's incredibly valuable, as you can imagine, to anyone developing a product. You don't want to get it all the way rolled out and find out everyone hates the mode of delivery or no one likes the flavor except for the 3 people who were on your R&D team, right? We've all been at brands that have seen that happen over time. So it's a great way to kind of avoid those kinds of lost financial gains.
Yeah. And there's something that we talk about a lot in marketing is using the words of your customers. So they feel like you're reading their minds. So it sounds like, especially if it's open-ended questions, that they're giving you a lot of keywords really that people like them would use. So if they're a fan of the product in the end and you use those same words to attract other people, it will attract other people like them.
That's a great point.
Yeah. So that sounds great. That sounds like a really amazing report if you could have all the details behind it. And then, man, I bet you'd also know what people would search online to find the product and different language that you could use to talk about the benefits or why it's different than another product.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And it's my hope that eventually we'll be able to capture user-generated video, maybe all through the process, right? We're not there yet, but to be able to do that for folks who are participating in the trial so that over the 6 weeks, we're collecting that data. And then at the end, what they think about it once they're unblinded and find out, what kinds of ingredients they were taking. So we do make it possible for brands too, if the participants are open to it at the end of the trial to receive brand marketing. So that and a lot of times they are clamoring to find out, like, this really helped me with my sleep. What was I taking? So we give permission, if the participant agrees, for the brand to reach out to them and say, surprise, you were taking this, right? And now you have a raving fan.
That's very cool.
Yeah. What else this makes me think, though? I'm like, hey, how do I get on that list so I can try new products?
And so you can do that at radicalscience.com as well. So you can reach out in a kind of sales capacity if you're thinking you're a company, brand, or retail and you'd like to learn more about how you could work with us. And if you're interested in being a participant in the trials that are actively recruiting are listed and you can click and be added. So that's one of the other things, Amanda, when you asked, what are some things behind the scenes that people might not expect? The screening process is one that I think not everyone thinks about, because if you're taking any medications that would potentially have contraindications, safety, things like that. We have a primary investigator, Dr. Emily Pauly, who works for Radical Science, and she is meticulous. Nothing is more important to her than the protection of the participants' health and identity protection, right? In terms of anonymity throughout the study, but then also protecting their health data at the end. She is so scrupulous about that. So we feel really lucky to have her on board.
Very cool.
Yeah, that's very interesting. It sounds like a good pairing that dovetails right into what you guys are doing over there. So the testing, so is that a requirement that they have to have? They have to show that what's in their product is in what they say is in their product is actually there. Sorry.
That's right. No, absolutely. We do require certificates of authenticity for not only the product that they send, but the placebo as well, wherever that's been manufactured. And then we quarantine everything, product and placebo, and do a second run of all of those QA, QC steps with a third party lab that we contract with, just because the health and safety of all of our participants is our primary, objective. So we do that second run as well.
Amazing.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm definitely going to the website because to see like what trials are out there. And one of the reasons why, of course, I'm going to sign up and be like, can I participate? But one of the things I think everyone could do is go look, and it'll give you some idea of new products that might be coming to your area soon. So some of our retailers might get some ideas around what might be popular that's coming in the door and what maybe they can get before other places could get them.
That's a great idea. Yeah. I love when I'm at, Expo West, Supply Side West. I know what's kind of coming around the bend in terms of industry trends. And especially on the supplier side, I start thinking like, oh, I'm going to start seeing some of these kinds of formulas come onto the marketplace soon. So I think that's a great strategy.
Well, thank you so much for spending some time with us today, Sarah. You've been a just absolute pleasure to speak with, and super excited to see just all of the success that you've had throughout your years in the industry, and look forward to just seeing what's next with Sarah. It's always something exciting, and you're just great everywhere you go. So thank you again for spending time with us.
Oh, I appreciate that, Amanda. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to be here with you both. It was a great conversation. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it was great to meet you. I'm excited about getting to see you at the shows in the future.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for listening to the Natural Products Marketer podcast. We hope you found this episode to be super helpful. Make sure you check out the show notes for any of those valuable resources that we mentioned on today's episode.
And before you go, we would love for you to give us a review, follow, like, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you're listening today. And make sure you join us for our next episode where we give you more marketing tips so that you can reach more people and change more lives.